Have you ever been punished for simply being honest? Not cruel, not rebellious, just real. You speak with sincerity, you stand without a mask, and somehow you become the enemy. The silence that follows your truth is louder than any scream. The rooms you once belonged to no longer open their doors, not because you failed, but because you stopped pretending. It's a strange cruelty of our time. The moment you become real, you become a threat. Let's begin there. They say authenticity is rare, but what they don't say is that authenticity is punished, not overtly, not with stones or chains, but with the slow erosion of space. Invitations stop coming, eyes look away, laughter fades when you enter the room, not because you did something wrong, but because you dared to stop doing something false. Every society has its myths. Ours is the myth of tolerance. We chant about openness, about self-expression, but only if that self fits the script. Only if that truth can be filtered, softened, sugar-coated. You can be yourself as long as yourself is easy to digest. But what if you're not easy to digest? What if your truth is raw, unpolished, disruptive? The persona, as Carl Jung described, is the mask we present to the world. It's not who we are. It's who we pretend to be so we can belong. The more we invest in the persona, the more we forget what's underneath. And when someone appears who has removed their mask, who dares to show the face beneath, we recoil. Not because of them, but because of what they remind us of. They remind us of everything we've buried, so we cancel them. Nietzsche saw it in the herd. In the collective comfort of mediocrity, the herd does not forgive difference. It does not welcome disruption. It protects the illusion of sameness at all costs, because sameness feels safe. Sameness is easy. Realness is dangerous. You speak up about manipulation in your friend group, and suddenly you're distant. You don't laugh at the joke everyone finds funny, and suddenly you're cold. You refuse to gossip, and suddenly you're the problem. Isn't it strange? When you were pretending, you belonged. When you were playing along, they loved you. But now that you're real, now that you say what you mean, now that you no longer smile to keep the peace, they turn their backs. You're not cancelled because you're cruel. You're cancelled because you're real. This world prefers illusion. We curate our lives, polish our personalities, edit our emotions. Filters not just on photos, but on our entire existence. And when someone comes along without one, it's too much, too raw, too unfiltered. You make them uncomfortable, not because you attacked them, but because your presence reveals their pretenses. So they ghost you, so they shame you, so they call you too much. They say, "You've changed. You've become so negative. You're overthinking." But the truth is, you've just become honest. There is something radical about being honest in a dishonest world. There is something revolutionary about refusing to wear the costume anymore. And revolutions are not welcomed. They are resisted. Nietzsche once wrote, "Do you ever feel like someone finally sees the part of you you've always hidden? Here, you don't have to hide anymore. You're safe now. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking this path together. Thank you." Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. You are not being rejected for being wrong. You are being rejected for being real, for not feeding the fantasy, for refusing to keep the mask on. Have you noticed? They don't cancel those who lie. They don't cancel those who manipulate with a smile. They cancel the ones who point to the lie and say, "This is not love. This is control." They cancel the ones who whisper, "That's not truth. That's conformity." They cancel the ones who stop clapping in the performance. You're not exiled for your flaws. You're exiled because your presence exposes theirs. So what do? Do you go back? Do you apologize for being real? Do you shrink again, smile again, nod again? Or do you keep walking? Here's the truth. The road of authenticity is narrow and lonely and filled with the sound of doors closing behind you. But it is also sacred, because every step forward is a return to your own soul. You begin to remember how it feels to speak and mean it, how it feels to cry and not hide it, how it feels to say no and not explain it. Yes, you lose them, but you find yourself. You're cancelled not because you did something wrong. You're cancelled because you stopped being what they needed you to be. You're cancelled because your freedom threatens their chains. You are real, and the world is not ready. But you are. There's a sacred solitude that follows being cancelled, a desert of isolation that only the authentic ever walk. But here, in this space without applause, something else awakens. Your real voice, your real face. Nietzsche once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." So, if you find yourself alone, not because you lied, but because you told the truth, maybe you are finally free. In the next chapter, we will ask, what happens when the mask becomes your only identity? When your truth is so buried, even you forget it's there. There comes a moment when you look into the mirror and can no longer tell where the performance ends and where you begin. The smile, the posture, the way you say, "I'm fine," when you're not. At first, it was survival. Then it became habit. Then it became you. What happens when the mask isn't something you wear anymore, but something you've become? Let's begin to peel it back. It begins with something simple, a silence, a pause, a slight hesitation before you say what you actually feel, and so you choose the safer route. You say what they expect, what won't shake the room, what won't draw eyes. Then you do it again and again until the mask becomes muscle memory. It's no longer a lie, it's just life. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, "This isn't me." You hush it, because being yourself has consequences. So you rehearse the script, you train your tone, you become fluent in what Carl Jung called the persona, the acceptable self, the curated self. And it works. You're accepted, included, admired even. But not for who you are, only for how well you play the part. So you smile when you want to cry. You agree when you want to scream. You show up even when you want to disappear. And no one knows the difference, because the mask fits so well now. But here's the danger. When the mask stays on too long, the real face beneath it begins to fade. Your truth, your needs, your edges, they blur. Until even you begin to believe the act. You wake up one day and realize you don't know what you feel anymore. You laugh, but you don't mean it. You say yes, but you feel trapped. You're surrounded by people, but utterly alone. Nietzsche once said, "Every deep thinker is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood." Because to be understood means to be seen, and when you've worn the mask for so long, being seen feels like being exposed. The persona protects you, but it also imprisons you. You begin to live in fear, not of rejection, but of authenticity. Because authenticity would tear the costume apart. And what if there's nothing left underneath? So you stay in character. At work, at dinner, even in bed, until the exhaustion sets in. It's not physical, it's existential. You're tired, not from doing too much, but from being too little of who you really are. There's a loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who love your mask, but have never met your soul. And that loneliness, it aches. Have you felt it? That quiet ache of being untouched in the middle of applause, that sinking grief of knowing they don't know you and maybe never will. You begin to ask, who am I when I'm not performing? What do I want when no one is watching? And the scariest question of all, do I even know? When the mask becomes you, it doesn't just cover your pain, it covers your potential, it sterilizes your spirit. It dims the parts of you that were meant to shine, not because they were safe, but because they were true. But the world loves masks. It rewards them. And yet, something in you rebels, quietly at first. You start speaking slower, softer. Maybe you let the silence linger. Maybe you say no without explaining. Maybe one day you cry in front of someone and don't apologize for it. And in that moment, the mask cracks. It's terrifying. But it's also holy. Because in that crack, something breathes, something ancient, something yours. You don't need to destroy the mask. You just need to stop believing it's you. Because beneath it, you're still there. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And maybe the journey isn't about taking the mask off all at once. Maybe it's about remembering that you were never the mask to begin with. In the next chapter, we'll face the consequences of taking that mask off in public, of being seen not as they expect, but as you are. Are you ready to be misunderstood? There is a violence in visibility, not the kind that breaks bones, the kind that exposes you. Have you ever been truly seen, not admired, not complimented, but seen? Someone looks past the performance, pierces the armor, and touches something raw. And your instinct isn't to thank them, it's to hide. Because being seen, really seen, feels like standing naked in the middle of a storm. Let's talk about why we fear being seen more than being ignored. You think you want to be seen. You ache for it. You crave connection, understanding, intimacy. But the moment someone truly sees you, your body flinches. Why? Because being seen isn't just about being known. It's about being vulnerable to rejection, to judgment, to the possibility that even when the curtain falls, you still won't be enough. There is a deep-rooted wound in many of us. The fear that who we are, unfiltered, is unlovable. So we build personas. We perfect our image. We become experts at presentation. Because it's safer to be accepted for a version of us than to be rejected for the real one. So when someone looks past all that, into the broken, trembling, soft parts, we panic. We want to run, not because they are dangerous, but because they're holding a mirror. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide because we were once taught they were unworthy. Our sadness, our anger, our hunger, our need. And when someone sees those parts, when they don't look away, it hurts. It hurts because it contradicts the story you've told yourself that no one could love that part of you. But here's the paradox. Being seen hurts, but being unseen kills. To be unseen is to die slowly, to walk through life like a ghost in your own story, to laugh in rooms where no one knows your sorrow, to be touched but never felt. It is a quiet starvation. So we live in the tension between the fear of being seen and the agony of not being. And that tension, it breaks us. You sabotage relationships. You push people away the moment they get too close. You hide behind humor, behind perfectionism, behind self-deprecation. Because if they never see the real you, they can't reject it. But they also can't love it. You say, no one understands me. But have you ever truly let them? You say, people leave. But have you ever invited them in? There's a sacred terror in intimacy, a holy ache in being known. And yet, this is the only place healing happens. In the raw, in the open, in the light. Nietzsche said, invisible threads are the strongest ties. But visibility? It is the cutting of the thread between mask and soul. To be seen is to risk, but it is also to live. Being seen will hurt, but it will hurt in the way a wound must be cleaned before it can heal. Because to be seen is not to be exposed, it is to be known. And if you can withstand the pain of visibility, you'll find something sacred on the other side. Connection that doesn't require pretending. Love that doesn't require performance. Presence that doesn't require polish. In the next chapter, we ask, what happens when you stop explaining yourself to the world? When you stop apologizing for existing as you are? There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly translating yourself, explaining your heart, justifying your silence, defending your softness. You say, I'm like this because, you say, please understand, it's just that. You say, I didn't mean to. Stop. You were not born to be understood by everyone. Let's talk about the liberation that begins the moment you stop explaining yourself. Since childhood, we're taught that being accepted means being explainable. Every choice, every feeling, every moment of sadness must be wrapped in reason. We are taught to be legible, to be easy to read, to make sense to everyone but ourselves. So we shrink, we translate, we apologize. I need rest becomes, I'm just a little tired. I feel overwhelmed becomes, it's probably nothing. I don't want to go becomes, I have other plans. We dilute the truth until it's acceptable, until it doesn't offend, until it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. But the truth is not always polite. The truth is not always convenient. And you owe it to yourself to stop wrapping your truth in bows for people who will never unwrap it with care. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because self-acceptance means you stop asking the world for permission to exist. You stop negotiating your right to feel. You stop explaining your no, your boundaries, your silence. Some people will never understand you because they never try to understand themselves. Let them go. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your healing, for your slowness, for your softness, for your scars. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be approved of. You are not here to be easy. You are here to be whole. And wholeness is not always explainable. The need to explain is a trauma response, a survival mechanism. Somewhere along the way, you were made to believe that clarity bought you safety, that justification bought you love, that if people could just understand why you are the way you are, then they would stay. But here's the truth. If someone only stays because you've made yourself understandable, they are not staying for you. They are staying for their version of you. Let them leave. There is nothing more holy than standing in your own truth without the need to translate it. You say, I don't want to go. That's enough. You say, I feel tired. That's enough. You say, I need space. That's enough. No paragraphs, no justifications, no apologies. You are allowed to exist without explaining why. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to reclaim yourself. You begin to hear your voice beneath the noise. You begin to feel the fullness of your own energy. You begin to walk through the world not as someone seeking validation, but as someone rooted in their own being. And yes, people will misunderstand you. Let them. Nietzsche wrote, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." You don't have to lower your volume for the deaf. You don't have to dim your fire for those who fear the heat. In the next chapter, we'll confront the final frontier of authenticity: aloneness. What does it mean to walk away, not to be dramatic, but to be free? There is a moment that feels like death. It's the moment you walk away. Not in anger, not in pride, just quietly. Because you've realized something earth-shaking. You don't need them. Not the noise, not the approval, not the company that costs you your peace. Let's talk about the power that comes when you finally choose solitude, not as punishment, but as liberation. You were taught to fear aloneness, conditioned to believe that solitude is failure, that if no one is beside you, something must be wrong, that being alone means being unloved, unwanted, abandoned. But what if being alone is the first time you are truly with yourself? Not the version of you who entertains, not the one who adjusts, not the one who fits in. Just you, in your rawness, your stillness, your truth. Carl Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that are important to you." What if the real loneliness isn't aloneness, but being surrounded by people with whom your soul stays silent? When you choose solitude consciously, it transforms. The silence stops being empty. It starts to echo with your own voice. You begin to hear what you need. You begin to feel what you've buried. You begin to breathe fully, deeply for the first time in years. It's uncomfortable at first, because without the crowd, without the mirror of others, you confront yourself. And that confrontation is terrifying. All the distractions dissolve, and all that's left is the person you've ignored. But keep looking, because underneath the discomfort is a power no one can give you, the power of self-trust. You begin to realize you don't need constant company to feel complete. You don't need to perform to feel worthy. You don't need to explain your joy, your pain, your desires. You just need to stand as you are. There is no freedom greater than being alone and unafraid. You're not afraid of silence anymore. You're not afraid of absence. You're not afraid of who leaves. Because you found something more permanent than belonging. You found home within. Freedom isn't in the applause. It's in the exhale. The moment you stop chasing. The moment you stop convincing. The moment you stop trying to fit a world that was never built for your soul. You realize you were never hard to love. You were just too real for people who only know how to connect through masks. Let them go. Freedom is the room you build for yourself, where your voice echoes back with clarity, where your soul doesn't shrink to survive. You walked away, not because you were broken, but because you were done betraying yourself to be understood. This is freedom, the silence, the solitude. The space that once scared you has become sacred. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." But now you obey only one voice, your own. This is the end of the performance, and the beginning of something far more powerful, your return to yourself.